This episode of FSM is brought to you by Fidelity Behavioral Alliance, your number one source for behavior change. Fidelity Behavioral Alliance creates behavior change programs for schools, parents, and organizations looking to reduce problem behaviors and improve performance outcomes. Find out more at www.fidelitybehavioralalliance.com. If you would like to sponsor an episode of FSM, email us at shitmom@gmail.com. That's shxtmom@gmail.com.
It's time to put the kids to bed, so y'all get ready for another episode of For Shitty Moms.
All right. Hi, everyone. You are tuned into For Shitty Moms, a behavior change podcast for moms who are trying to get their shit together. I'm your host, DeLauren, and today I would like to introduce our special guest, Latonya, who is joining us live here in sunny South Florida. So, Latonya, say hello to our listeners and go ahead and introduce yourself. You're going to tell us your name, age, where you're from, family size, and marital status.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Latonya. I'm 35 years old. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, 2 daughters, and a husband. And we are originally from Miami, Florida, currently residing in Palm Beach County.
All right. Thank you for joining us. We're here today because, of course, motherhood is always a hot topic of discussion, but we definitely here at Shitty Moms, we like to look at motherhood through the life of a mom, first and foremost, working moms, and just looking into the whole aspect of juggling work, career, motherhood, personal life, etc. So tell us a little bit about your occupation, like what do you do, and how has motherhood impacted your work life?
Okay, so I currently work for a metro-sized government entity. I've been there for almost 11 years. Prior to that, I worked in the nonprofit sector, and currently I serve in an administrative capacity. And so obviously, with the 60-year-old being the oldest, I had my daughter when I was already in my career. So I can definitely speak from life before having children and working in a career and how that looks now with trying to balance a family. And so in that administrative capacity, I oversee a number of public health programs. And so my schedule is primarily 8 to 5, just a regular 8-hour shift. But my at the point that I'm at, my job is pretty much very flexible, so I can appreciate like whenever I do need to handle something with the children, with the family, any personal things. I'm granted that grace at work to be able to do so without feeling like I'm going to lose my job or I won't be able to climb that ladder any further.
Okay, and I'm glad you bring that up. That's something that I did want to ask you about because I know a lot of women out there, usually we hear about it or we experience when you are trying to climb the ladder in corporate America and you kind of are put in positions where you have to choose between career and motherhood. I can speak from personal experience. My background is in teaching. I know a lot of moms out there are teachers. So that's just one of the fields that, you know, you're kind of familiar and you're used to hearing women being teachers, mothers being teachers, and oh, you get the holidays off, you get the breaks off, you get off work early, you get when your kid goes to school, you go to school. However, I can say from personal experience, I did feel a lot of pressure once I started showing interest in climbing the ladder. It suddenly became an issue like, oh, you're planning on having kids? Oh, how many kids do you want? And it's just not really something you expect in teaching. So it's interesting to hear that you work in the government sector and they're actually pretty flexible with you as a mom. I would think it would be the opposite. You know, government, you think very rigid, no work life balance, no flexibility, and you would think the opposite with teaching. And here it is, you were able to climb the ladder and still be able to be present with your family. So that's awesome to hear. So it sounds like for you and your situation, you're definitely in a mom friendly environment. So I wanted to know, like, besides working and parenting, do you have any other hobbies? Like, does your schedule allow you to have like other hobbies or allow you to be involved in other interests or side hustles or business ventures or anything like that?
So, I actually have a 45-minute to an hour commute. So that's about 2 hours a day. I'm on the road traveling to and from work. And then my daughter she's involved in cheerleading. And so as of late, my schedule has just kind of revolved around her schedule. I move around her schedule with her extracurricular activities, if you will. And I'm trying to carve out some time because that has been a challenge. So I'm trying to carve out some time to do some things for myself. Like I may get one day out of the weekend whenever I do carve out that time and make that time for that. But otherwise, generally, no, I don't have time. I don't have time to do things for myself without either the kids tagging along or doing something to entertain them.
Right. And I think most listeners, moms in general, we kind of all have that same struggle. I feel like I rarely hear any moms like, oh, this is what I do in my spare time.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I do. It's like once you have kids, that kind of, if you have kids, a partner,
Mm-hmm.
a career, you know, where do you find the time? Like, it's not enough hours in the day to squeeze one more thing in. I feel like I see that a lot. The more involved the kids are, and then you start to look at if you have multiple children in the household. Like, so how do you juggle the different? I mean, and you also you're married as well.
Right.
So then juggling that, are you able to carve time out like for your marriage, for you and your significant other, or is that kind of like get it in when you can? It takes the back burner. How does that look?
So currently, my husband and I are on opposite schedules. So he works overnight. I work during the day. Remember, I said I had that 8 to 5 schedule. And so we'll try to do things like we'll cook together where we can. If there's an event that comes up that the two of us can kind of hang out, we've been trying to prioritize that. But on a regular basis, we're just kind of in passing, if you will. And I think we do understand that we do need to prioritize the marriage outside of the kids. So we do try to make it a point to do things as a family, do things with the kids, and also do things together as a couple, just to kind of continue to nourish that relationship.
Okay, and how often, not with like getting too involved, but how
Yeah.
often are you actually able to like just have that one on one time with each other?
Um, maybe the goal would be like once or twice a month.
Okay.
But sometimes we miss a month, and then the 2 months have passed where we're just kind of passing over. We're constantly doing things with the kids and running around their schedules and moving them around our own work schedules as well. So I would say the goal would be to try and do something exclusively for the two of us, maybe once or twice a month, but that doesn't always happen.
Okay. And how is your significant other, like, are they okay with that, or is it like, sometimes you have one person that's like, we haven't done anything,
Yeah.
we haven't seen each other, or is it like, look, we're both busy, we have a goal, like we're working on a mission towards something right now,
Yeah.
and what does
So
that look like?
what I will say is, the last few years, we've kind of been in like a grind mode,
Okay.
right? So I think both of us have been under the understanding that, okay, we're doing things to kind of set ourselves up, and set the kids up for a better future. So with that, we have an understanding, like if I'm at work or I'm working extra hours for whatever reason, that's just kind of understood, and we both kind of respect that.
Okay.
Like that also is a priority. Like we have to make money, so
Right. Absolutely. Especially now. Yeah.
right. So I don't know that either of us are complaining when like the time is tight, because we kind of understand like the time is tight because we're working, because we have other goals that we're trying to meet. But sometimes we will look up and like, oh, we need to do something.
Okay.
And then obviously recognizing that we haven't done anything exclusively in a while, we will make time for that.
Okay. And how does that look? Do you like have a mommy village where you just call up, like, I don't know, your parents or your friends and like, hey, I need a sitter? Or like, do you have to put money aside in the budget to pay for a sitter to make sure that's taken care of? Like, what's the game plan? How does that look?
So I think we have a pretty good village. Like we've established a few options. Like I said, we're originally from Miami and we're currently residing in Palm Beach County. So that's about another hour drive away. And so for the most part, either we'll get my mom to come up to our house to sit, or we'll take the kids down to my mom
Okay.
to sit.
So at least you have the resources.
Right. And then I also have established a village here. I guess I would call it my mini village here in Palm Beach, where I have a few friends that are here also, and their families live in other places. And so we've kind of banded together, I guess, to kind of support each other, knowing that everybody doesn't have mom to call just to come, or mom isn't always available, or have other family members that are always available. So we try and trade off and help each other out.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's tough to find even one person that you trust
Right.
enough, like outside of family members, and even some family members, it's kind of tough to find someone that you trust enough to like leave your kids with,
Right.
even for a few hours. So that's awesome if you have multiple sources that you can kind of reach out to,
Right.
to get some of that personal time. That's pretty great, because I know now everybody's busy. Parents, grandparents are even working.
Right.
They're not retired and staying at home.
Yeah.
So it's like that hustle and bustle is constant.
Yeah. And even just speaking with a couple of my girlfriends, like everybody's experiencing the same thing, because when we were children, like our grandparents were available for us, and our parents were able to move how they needed to move,
Right.
Work how they needed to work, or do whatever they had to do in their leisure time. And they always had somebody that was home available. They didn't have to worry about childcare, after school care, things of that
Right.
sort. Like when school was out, like summer break and winter break, they didn't really have to worry about making arrangements for the kids. And so just speaking with a lot of my friends, we're all kind of in that same space where we've kind of looked around like, well, where are our grandparents that are always
Right.
available? Because we definitely don't have that. And obviously because our parents are still working.
Correct.
you know, so they don't have as much leisure time, free time to be able to just drop everything and the
Right.
kids are taken care of regardless. So we are having to become a little more resourceful.
Right. And even I think just the upbringing itself, just how we grew up in general, working class families, they kind of banded together.
Yeah.
I can remember growing up here, and right behind my house was my aunt's house. So if my mom wasn't home,
Mm-hmm.
me and my sister would really just walk through the backyard and
Yeah.
go to my aunt's house. And my aunt was home, my uncle was home.
Yeah.
If they weren't home, we would walk down the street like a block. Both of our grandmothers on my mom's side and my dad's side were on the same street, just on the next block. So if all of our parents had to work, we still had two grandmas that we would
Right.
just go to their house any time of day, any day of the week, and they were home. If they weren't home, we knew they would be back shortly.
Right.
It wasn't a big deal. Like, that was the norm. I can say now that I'm raising my own son, we've kind of moved away. All of us are kind of dispersed in different areas. So it
Right.
takes more effort for me to just see my aunt or see my cousins who have kids that are the same age. Our kids don't play together as much as we did when I was growing up. And even, I don't even trust my son right now to walk down the street a block. Like,
Right.
if he tells me he's going to the next block to somebody's house, I'm like, wait, what? What are you doing? Where are you going? Like,
Right.
that's not a thing here.
Right.
And just thinking about how we grew up as kids, you know, you could walk. If you had a bike, you were all around town, just out and about. And if you needed childcare, it really wasn't anything formal, at least not that I saw as a kid. It wasn't anything formal. Is
Right.
your mom told you where to go, you went. On the rare occasion that my mom or my aunt decided to go out for a weekend, we had uncles, we had cousins, we had grandparents. Like, it wasn't a big thing. But now you see things like, I had a mom tell me maybe like 2 weeks ago, she had contacted someone from sitter.com, and I'm like, what? But
Right.
you know, she needed childcare.
Right,
So it
right.
was like, look, I got this girl coming to pick my son up. I got her from sitter.com. This is her contact information. Like, let me know if he gets picked up. Let me know what time she comes. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, but this is reality now.
Yeah.
Now you have people, you depend on those things. I was even telling my sister, like, man, I wish they had like Uber for kids, like
Mm-hmm.
picking up my son from school every day. Like, that is a hassle, just getting back and forth. Trying to go when you get a break at work is just a lot to try to juggle and figure out.
Right. Right. And just speaking of like a different village, I think we just live in a different time because obviously like I said, the grandparents were home and you said like you had an aunt or uncle, like you had family that lived in close proximity so that you guys can go to. Like now I used to take the city bus in Miami as a kid. I can remember probably as early as second grade. I wouldn't dare put my kid on
Can you
a
imagine?
city bus by herself at that age, let alone like I don't. She probably won't ever experience the city bus, but definitely not at that young age. But our parents also relied on like the community to look after their children as well, and I think we've kind of moved away from that.
Yeah, I agree. You really don't see that community involvement
Right.
as much. When they say it takes a village, I feel like I grew up with the village. Even if after school care was not an option for me, I knew I could go to like our local park,
Right.
and I knew a couple of the counselors there. Even if I wasn't in a program, they were going to look out.
Right.
My tennis coach, he didn't have a formal tennis training program. It's just, we got out of school. We used to hang out at the park. He was already at the park, and we were going to be productive. We weren't just going to hang out at the park and possibly get in trouble. So they threw some tennis rackets in our hands, and okay, you're going to learn how to play tennis. And on the rare occasion when the pool was open, okay, you're going to learn how to swim, and they really kept us preoccupied until our parents got home, until they got off from work to pick us up.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a village there, and those were not family members. It was just people who knew your mom when your mom was younger. My family on my mom's side, they're not originally from here. My mom moved to South Florida from Georgia as a teenager. So a lot of the people in the community, it was kind of like, oh, I knew your mom. Oh, I looked after your mom when she was this age. Or, oh, I knew your mom when she first moved here.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would look out for us just because they knew who our parents were,
Right.
and we respected them. We knew if they told us to do something, to just have that same level of respect for them that we would any other family member. And I think that kind of made it a lot easier for people to support
Right.
parents who were still working and just not able to set up any formal childcare. I feel like nowadays, if you're an adult, you say something to correct a child's behavior, it's a thing, right?
Yeah.
So nobody wants to say anything, nobody wants to help out, and then that village just kind of dissolves on its own. So it's great to hear that you have a support system outside of family that you can just rely on to kind of give you a break when you need it, or give you some personal time when you need it. And are these like a group of moms that you met in adulthood? Are they people you grew up with? What is your village composed of?
So, some are just friends that I've kind of picked up along the way, whether that's a friend from college, friends from high school, that are just by way we just kind of ended up in the same geographic location. And then I've recently met somebody through my daughter's I'm sorry, her cheerleading program. There are like two moms that we've kind of started to establish a relationship with. And so we've kind of supported each other. So, because even like you said, it's a hassle for a pickup. With me working an hour away, depending on the day, depending on how the traffic looks, sometimes I can't always get to my kid on time to pick up from aftercare at the specified pickup time. And so I would be able to call anyone from that group to say, hey, can you pick up? I'm running about 15 minutes or 30 minutes late even. So I think having the village, honestly, that's something that is kind of new, but something that I recognized that I needed to establish, like once my kid A started school, and then B when we moved away from our hometown.
Okay.
So we had to establish that village. But in doing so, then you realize that pretty much all of us are looking for the same thing. All of us are trying to establish a village, or we all need the extra help for one reason or another. And so sometimes it is like just helpful, even if on the weekend or just for one night, we can swap off the kids and like have them come sleep over at my house, or have mine go over theirs, so that is usually really helpful. But I will say, because my kid is just entering elementary school in the last few years, that's something I'm just now starting to recognize as something that we absolutely need, between work, the school schedule, the cheerleading schedule, like
That's
all
a
these,
lot.
like all these schedules, like I'm not going to be able to do it all. And again, like I said, depending on the day, depending on the traffic, a lot of times there's an accident. So what my normal 50-minute commute, that might turn into an hour and 30-minute commute.
Gotcha.
So, and then I'm late.
And how did you go about deciding who would be a part of this village? Like, is it like, oh, me and another mom hit it off really well? Or do you look for certain characteristics? Do you look for certain things in moms that you kind of invite into that mommy village?
So I will say, for me, I like for things to kind of happen organically. So if mom and I are kind of getting along fine, um, we can go out if the kids are around the same age. If they get along well, we can go out. You know, I wouldn't just send my kid right off the bat like once I'm just meeting somebody, but basically like after, really, I can't even put a time frame on it, but until I feel comfortable,
Okay.
like if I've had outings with this mom and her kids, on a couple of occasions, like, and I will say, in doing that, I'm not consciously, but it's just something that you do subconsciously. You're kind of looking at their parenting style as well, just to, you know,
Right.
make sure that it's something that aligns with how you parent your kid, because obviously you don't want to send your kid somewhere that they're going to be uncomfortable just for the sake of I need a break.
Right. Absolutely.
So I think just organically, like hanging out with mom and their kids, and just kind of seeing how that goes, and if all goes well, if the kids hit it off, if um, myself and mom have an open line of communication, then generally, like it starts off as like, oh, one night, like we can try a night to spend the night or something, or a play date at their house without me, that's not like supervised by me,
Right.
or vice versa, and then just kind of see how that goes. And if it goes well, like I think that's kind of how some of it was established, and then others, it, like these are people that I know,
Right.
that are kind of close knit to me and my family. So
And I say that like I'm sitting here laughing because as you're talking about it, I'm just thinking about the few attempts that I made at like, oh, we should link up. Oh, we should. And it's kind of like you see different moms in different areas, whether it's like an after school activity,
yeah,
practice, extracurricular, school activity, and it's like, oh, like
yeah,
this could work. Like this
right.
could be great. And then you get in a different environment and then you're like, whoa, what's happening?
Correct, right. And I think it happens, like, and you find ways to adjust, pivot, and something that you think might work out, sometimes it's not going to work out because maybe the kids don't get along that great, right?
Right.
Like,
Or the
maybe
parenting style isn't really
in
aligned.
alignment.
And usually for me, I can say that's usually my thing that I look at the most because I know how I am as a mom. I know my child. I
Right.
know what behaviors and what comes along with it. So really, I'm looking for someone that's going to treat my kid as if, treat my kid like they were your own.
Right.
But then I've even told myself, like, wait a minute, maybe I don't. Like, once you see that parenting style, like,
Right.
oh, maybe I don't want you to treat my kid like you treat your kid because, oh, it's not,
Yeah.
aligned with the parenting style. So I know those are things that I look at, and sometimes it can be great, and sometimes it's like a disaster, like abort mission.
Right.
Let's try to go back to the drawing board. So with that brings me to my next question. How would you describe yourself as a mom? Like your parenting style.
Right. I think that I'm looking for the right word.
And be real, this is called For Shitty Moms for a reason. So don't think you have to kind of sugarcoat because we have all different types of parenting styles and mom styles and how do you see yourself?
So, right, I get that, but I'm trying to figure out if I can sum up how I view my parenting style. I think for the most part, I'm pretty easygoing.
Okay.
Pretty easygoing. Things like education, obviously, I'm a little tougher in that area. And maybe more affiliative, just, like, because obviously I feel like I want my kids to be comfortable with me. Like, I want her to be able to talk to me, obviously when you have a kid, time just goes on so quickly. But then also being authoritative when necessary. Like, I don't think that we always have to rule with an iron fist. I don't think that children should be afraid of their parents to some degree.
What? Oh.
To some degree, but I don't think that kids should be like fear their parents. So you kind of gotta strike the balance, and that's something that I'm just trying to figure out. And then obviously parenting with a partner, that looks a little different also, because sometimes you guys aren't always in agreement with
Right.
the way that the parenting should be, what the parenting style should be. So we've kind of butted heads a couple of times, like run into some conflict because if you ask my husband, he'll tell you that I gentle parent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is he more of the like disciplinarian?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, but I think to some degree it works. Like, I do find myself, like, I've had to learn over time, like, okay, don't always get in the way. Don't always interfere, like intervene when he's doing his thing. So I'm working on that.
Okay, so if you don't agree with their like approach or how they handle a certain situation, but you don't want to get in the way, how do you handle that?
I don't think I won't address like my dismay, if you will. I won't address that in front of the kid, because obviously I do believe like we need to be a united front.
Okay.
But in private, we'll have a discussion about it, and generally it's we both kind of see things differently, and we've just kind of come to understand and respect that. Like, we have a difference of opinion,
like an agree to disagree type situation.
We agree to disagree.
Okay, and sometimes that's best, because certain things you're just not going to see eye to eye. Right. I know for me, describing myself as a mom, I'll say I'm the one that's like all over the place. It definitely comes from a place of love. But I've noticed, to my own fault, like I will default to the parenting style that I was raised with.
Right, and I think a lot of people do that.
Right. So I just didn't realize like how much I do it. Right. So I don't want to say like I rule with an iron fist, but you know, that's how I was raised. I was raised with a no nonsense single mom. Like, she worked at one point, she worked 4 jobs at one time. So there was no room for foolishness, mistakes. Like, our lectures are, look, we got warnings. Don't have them people call my job. I better not have to go to the school. That was it. Like, that's all we got. So I know sometimes when certain situations arise with me, my son, when I don't know what to do, it's like, all right, this is going to be it. Enough is enough. I said what I said. And you know, this generation now, they need explanation.
They got a voice.
They want to be heard.
They have a voice.
They need to know why. They need to explain their point of view. And it's like, excuse me, you're 10. You don't get a voice. It's because I said so. And really, I default to that out of fear, because I'm like, in the back of my mind, like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know what to do, but I don't want him to see that I'm panicking and I don't know what to do. So I'm like, because I said so. In the discussion. Right. Which is never a good thing. I think I noticed it the more I started to do it, the more I started thinking back to the way that I was raised by my mom. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Was she doing that because she didn't know what to do? Like,
more than likely.
Yeah. So I'm like,
but all right. I think a lot of people do. That you default to what you know.
Absolutely.
What's familiar in whatever situation. That can be parenting. That can be at work. That can be just in anywhere. You default. You default to what you know, because it's harder to do something different.
Right. Absolutely.
So, and I think my mom was, she has a similar parenting style like mine, even though like
kind of chill, laid back.
Yep. kind of chill, laid back, unless you do something to like really piss her off.
Okay, so you think you do
Then-
it as a default, or you do it like that's just you, your
If it's
personality?
consciously- It might be a little bit of both.
Okay.
It might be a combination, because again, like you realize, sometimes we do things because we just default to what we know, and then we don't even realize that that's what we're doing.
Right. Until
So-
after
Right.
you kind of
until
try
you
to
sit back
unpack
and-
it.
Right. Analyze the situation. So, I don't know. I think she definitely has like a similar parenting style.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that leads me to my next question. I want you to think a little bit on this one before you give an answer. So, thinking about your parenting style and like how you've handled situations in the past, my next question is, what was your most recent shitty mom experience? It can be an experience in general. It can be something you did, a way you handled a situation that you kind of wish, like, oh, I should have handled that better. Anything.
I don't know.
Or something that you kind of do quite often that you're like, oh, I need to do better with that. Like, I just did it again. Something that you want to work on as a mom.
I need to figure out how to strike the balance, though. Like, how to, give the kids the time and attention that they need, feed their interests, but also carve out time for myself as well. Like, I think that's where I feel like I'm struggling.
Okay.
Because I think, and I know this was a couple years ago, but just speaking on the shitty mom experience, during the pandemic, I was working an extraordinary amount of hours, like a ridiculous amount of hours, and I hardly like saw my family. Like I was always out working because that's what my career called for at the time. And sometimes it was me signing up for extra hours because I wanted the extra money, right? And so during that time, I did feel an extreme amount of mom guilt just because I was away a lot. Like my daughter was in dance at the time. So there were a lot of things that I missed. Like I didn't get to take her to school. I didn't get to pick up. And generally my husband drops off, I pick up. And I wasn't able to do either of that. And then I had to rely on other people to do it. Even like taking her to her doctor's appointments, I wasn't able to be there for those things either. And she had like her end of year dance performance. I had to miss it because I had to work. So during that time, it was a lot of like me just not being present because I was working. But obviously the way I handled that was just kind of resting on the fact that it was something that I was doing temporarily to set the family up for something else, just to kind of get us out of one situation and move us into a better situation. And at the time she was like 4. So I was like, oh, she's not gonna,
she's not going to notice.
she's not gonna remember.
Right.
She's not gonna notice, but she will ask, like even back then, because my kid is very opinionated.
Okay.
Like, very opinionated. And so she will ask, like, how come daddy always has to take me to school? How come daddy always has to pick me up? And speaking of which, just something more recent, like sometimes, and I'll give in because of that time where I was just constantly working and I wasn't there and I wasn't available for those things. So sometimes in the morning, like her dad takes her to school, I pick her up. This year we're trying something different. Dad is dropping off and picking up because we reduced her hours of aftercare.
Okay.
In an effort to, 1, save money, and then
Right.
2, get her out of school. Like, so her day isn't as long.
Okay.
But some days of the week in the morning, like I'll help get her ready. And so thereby I'm a little late to
for
work.
work.
I'm always late to work.
Yeah.
So because I know that I can't be there to pick up and drop off. So I'm like, okay, I'll help her get ready in the morning.
Right.
Right. And then sometimes she's like, who's taking me to school? She's like, why can't you? Actually, she just did this last week.
Oh.
I think of it. She's like, why can't you take me to school? Why does
she needs
daddy
that
always
agenda.
have to take me to school? And then I'm like, okay, I'll take you to school. And then I'm like an hour late to work instead of being 30 minutes late to work. But obviously, I feel like I'll give in those moments because I know I'm not able to do that because my work schedule doesn't allow for that.
Right.
But, it is what it is.
And what you're describing really is kind of like the birthplace of four shitty moms. I can say there are countless times where you're just hit constantly, like over and over and over, with the mom guilt because you are trying to set things up for your family. You're trying to provide a certain lifestyle
Right.
for yourself and for your family.
Right.
And it really forces you to make those hard choices all the time. I can say from personal experience, that's where the term shitty mom came from, because, it might happen once that you have to kind of put your kid on the back burner and prioritize something else. I know for me, it wasn't always work. Before getting to this point in my career where I am now, it was school.
Right.
So that's really where it came from. Like, but I realized as a teacher early on, like looking at my paycheck, looking at what I'm spending on childcare, it was like, ooh, this isn't gonna work. And I'm married. I'm not doing this as a single mom. So I can't even imagine how many difficult choices single moms have to make.
Right.
Because I know we were and still are a 2-parent household. And that little paycheck from teaching, I didn't think about it then, but people were always saying like, oh, I just stayed home when my kid was that young.
Right. Because the cost of childcare is so much.
And it didn't, I feel like I do tell people, and it's not a secret, I feel like I had my son very young. My husband and I are about 4 years apart. So I feel like for him, it was like prime time, right? But for me, being 4 years younger, I'm just getting started. Like, and being a woman, I know I had to explain that to him constantly. When I found out I was pregnant, it was just like panic, like, oh my God, what did I do? I ruined my career before I even started one. And again, people think about teaching as like a mom driven career, but once you start looking at the different paths that you can take within education, it's really not. It's very demanding. If you want to go into leadership, if you want to go into administration, you are looking at those long hours. You know, the administrators in the school setting, they open up the school. They close the school. Think about all the after school activities. They are there from the time the school opens to the time it closes.
Right.
So seeing that, I'm 22, 23 at the time, looking at my paycheck and then looking at my career options. Like, I wanted to be an administrator. I needed to climb that ladder.
Yeah.
And then I have people telling me like, oh, you're looking kind of round. Like, oh, are you sure? And at the time, I was on like a 1-year contract.
Yeah.
So people, that teacher's lounge, stay away from the teacher's lounge. That teacher's lounge, like, I started showing around like 7 months. And luckily, like, summertime was coming up. But when I started showing, they were like, oh, this is your first year at this school. Like, you don't have PTO. You don't have, like, you don't even have a guaranteed contract.
Yeah.
If they find out you're pregnant, they just might not give you a contract for next year because you're not going to be here. You're going to be out on maternity leave. So it's like all of that as a first-time mom, thinking that, I'm just hearing this to get the job to teach in a classroom.
Yeah.
They don't even know I want to go into administration because I needed more money.
Yeah.
So very early on, like, I hid that pregnancy at work until I couldn't hide it anymore. I think finally around like 7 months, I could not hide it anymore. But by that time, I had gotten the contract and I signed it.
Yeah.
I turned it in and then I went to my principal like, I'm so sorry. Like, I just have to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm 7 months pregnant. I just want you to know what to expect.
Yeah.
But I need the job. Like, I need this job. I need this money. And thank goodness, thank God for my principal at the time.
Yeah.
God bless him. He was so chill, and he was like, well, to be completely honest, he's old school. That's none of my business, but
Yeah.
congratulations. Like,
Right.
and then what he ended up doing was sending me to his secretary, like, hey, you're young, you're new to the field.
Yeah.
Let her walk you through how to set up your maternity leave.
Yeah.
Let her walk you through how to arrange your benefits, because you're going to want more time with that baby.
Right.
And I was not expecting that at all.
So I have a similar story. I have always been like very career driven, and obviously understood very early on that I wanted to be in administration just because I wanted to be in administration just because that's where the money is, right? Like, we figure the higher you go, the more money you're going to make.
Right.
Right. The more job security you would have. And so that was something that was always my goal. I wasn't quite sure the path in which I would take to get there, but I knew that was something that I wanted to do. And so I got my first opportunity in leadership. I became a program manager. And my supervisor at the time, she resigned in like May of the year that I was pregnant, and I was due to have my baby in October. Right. So just a few months before I was due to give birth, but then the opportunity opened up for me to serve in the role in the interim. Right. But I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, like, I'm pregnant. They're not going to pick me. Like,
Right.
they're not going to give me the role because I'm going to go on leave like shortly after. So luckily that all worked out. But there was this fear of like, because I'm serving in the interim, I need to show and prove.
Correct.
Right.
Absolutely.
Like, I need to show and prove. I need to show them that I can handle this. But obviously at the time I have doctor's visits.
Right.
My grandma had passed away. So a lot of stuff was happening. Like, luckily, I've been with the same leadership at my current job for a very long time. And so they were very understanding, very understanding, especially my boss at the time. She just sat me down like, look, you can't be Superwoman. You can't do it all. It is okay. If you need to go on maternity leave early, go. Take the time. It's all right. And I was just stuck in grind mode. Like, no, I need to show and prove.
Right.
And I remember having I packed my computer with me to go to the hospital.
Right.
That was with my hospital bag because we had a report due, and I wanted to make sure that stuff was turned in, and it was turned in on time, and the reports were right. Like, I remember speaking to our contract manager. I'm sitting on the phone at home having contractions, talking to a contract manager because I'm like, this stuff has to be right.
Right.
And I want this role. And so I secured the role by the time I was due for birth. But even that, we are allowed up to 6 months of maternity leave.
Oh, that's nice.
Right. So I set that all up, and I only ended up doing 4.
Okay.
About 4 months. Because, again, I knew that I was in this new role, and I wanted to excel,
Right.
like I wanted to continue to move forward. So I do think that, like, being a woman and wanting to have a family and all of that stuff, and I think I delayed starting a family. I didn't have my daughter until I was like 28. So I was a little late to the party with regards to my friend circle. But even still, like, I was still new in this world, this phase of my career. So I have a similar experience as well. But I don't know. You just figure it out. It always works out. That's
it sounds
what
like
I've come
it.
to.
It
to
sounds
realize.
and it's great that you were able to just have an administration that was very supportive.
Yeah.
Because a lot of women don't have that.
Yeah, and I don't take that for granted.
Right, absolutely. And I know I'm in a different capacity now, and I feel like this day and age, everyone is so PC. They try to remain politically correct.
Yeah.
So what we're describing, to a degree, it is workplace discrimination, you know, so nobody will ever, especially.
They're not going to blatantly say it.
Correct.
But you know.
Correct. Absolutely.
You know what they mean.
They'll give you another explanation or another reason as to why you were not selected for a certain position and things like that. But they won't explicitly blame it on motherhood or maternity leave. They're not going to say that explicitly. Yeah. But those are things that we have to take into consideration as women. Yeah. You know, and the burden really does fall on us. I can say as a married woman, 9 times out of 10, if my son is sick, the school is calling me. Even if I put my husband's number on that paper, they call him if they absolutely cannot get in touch with me. Right. But I'm that point of contact. And I experienced that very early. I think I went back to work 6 weeks after, like, when that leave was up. I didn't have any more. I was a brand new teacher. So you kind of have to read that fine print. You know, you're signing these contracts. And thankfully, my aunt was there, and I was comfortable with her enough. Like, my baby was her baby. Yeah. So, and she's still, like, that bond and that connection is there. When he was first born, before we even finalized the arrangements for me to go back to work, she was already calling, oh, let me see my baby. So when we brought him home, she wanted to see her baby. And that gave me so much comfort because, one, I didn't know what I was doing as a new mom. I can't sit here and tell you that that mommy instinct kicked in right away. Like, it took some time. Yeah. But while it took time for me to develop that maternal instinct, I had my village. I had my aunt, and my village is small. Like I said, I had my son pretty young. And that means that my village, like my mom and my mom is grandma, right? And she would kill me if she heard me calling her grandma. She's BB. But, you know, she's young and she still works full time as well. So I had to rely on my aunt to do that child rearing. Yeah. At the time, my husband was trying to climb the ladder. Right. So even when we were like in not labor and delivery, but the maternity ward at the hospital, I can remember him getting phone calls because they knew he wanted to climb that ladder, and they're like, hey, I know your wife just gave birth, but when you coming back? So he was getting those phone calls. And then for me, it was, you know, once you have a kid, now everyone at work is watching. Is she going to come back? Or is she going to stay with that baby? All moms want to stay with their baby. Yeah, I wanted to, but you start to look at the finances. I can't afford. Right. I couldn't afford to stay home with the baby. And then when you start paying for childcare, it's like, ooh, I can't afford childcare. Like, I can't afford this either. Right. But it didn't register. People would tell me things like that, and I think some of my colleagues were trying to give me that insight, like, girl, you don't make money as a brand new teacher. Right. Childcare is going to be more than your paycheck. Right. So I really, in my mind, some money coming in was better than no money coming in. Right. So I made that choice. Like, hey, I got to go back to work. Like, my husband, he's holding it down, but I didn't want that burden to be all on him. So that was the first, like, shitty mom moment. I want to stay with my baby who's 6 weeks. Yeah. But I'm taking my ass to work, and I'm like pumping in the closet at work because, you know, legally, oh, you have to give mothers. Yeah. And my space was like, space at my job. Look, well, let me work for the government because my space was this roach infested, science closet that, like, I would sit there and pump while another teacher was actually in the classroom teaching. And my teacher bestie at the time, she studied genetics. So one day she walked into the like we had science labs at the time because I was a science teacher. So she walked into the closet and saw me pumping, and she's like, she studied genetics. So she's like, well, after 4 months, the baby really isn't going to get any more immunity. And I'm like, what? She was like, yeah. So what do you do? Like every hour you just come and sit with the rats and roaches and like pump your milk? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, at 4 months, he's not getting any more immunity, but you could keep on if you want to. So, that mom guilt was kind of like, I don't know, pacified a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing you hear, you need to breastfeed. Like there's a lot of pressure to breastfeed instead of giving your kid formula.
Right.
So it's like, shitty mom moment number. Like, I'm losing track now, but another shitty mom moment. Like, I'm going to put my kid on this formula.
Yeah.
Instead of doing the pumping. Like I did the breastfeeding, I did the pumping, we made it to 4 months, and this is no longer practical for my lifestyle.
Once I returned back to work, like I said, I took 4 months off, but once I returned back to work and I had a space, and I had a space to pump at work. It's just my work schedule it didn't allow for me to actually take those regimented breaks to go sit down somewhere and pump. And because there's always something that I was either getting a phone call, or there was a meeting that I needed to attend, or there was somebody in my office. So, and again, I'm new into my role, so I want to show and prove. I still want to climb the ladder. I want them to know that I know what I'm doing. They made the right decision by giving me this position. So shortly after I returned back to work, I may have made it to 6 months, and that was it.
Yeah. And I can say for the moms who do adhere to that strict breastfeeding schedule, they know their rights, they know their laws, they know, I can say from my experience, those moms were seen as like a pain in the ass at work.
Right.
And then you start to hear the little comments in passing like, she's pregnant again. Like, damn, do we need to have a cap on the number of kids we can have? It's just not a great or ideal situation to be in, because I can honestly say those women who were firm with, I need my 15 minutes, you're going to have to find coverage.
Yeah.
I need to go pump. And then if they came back the next year and they were pregnant again, you start to hear the comments like, oh God, here she goes.
Here she goes again.
Yeah. So I can tell you, and who knows, it may have been a coincidence. I don't think it was a coincidence, but those women were never assigned leadership roles.
Yeah.
So those same women, a few years later on down the line, like our kids are getting older, me personally, I ended up moving up because, like you said, I had the same mindset. You got to show and prove.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a kid, but I can't let my kid be an excuse for a mediocre performance, right? Because you do have to stand out.
Yeah.
So I always had that mindset. So I was the department chairperson at a young age. I was taking on different leadership roles very early, and I worked my way up into school administration at the same school. And in hindsight, talking to those same moms, we bump into each other. Now they are still where I was several years ago, 5, 6, 7 years on down the road. They're, it's just not enough money.
Yeah.
Oh, it's, my husband had to get a second job. I might have to get a second job. I don't know who's going to watch the kids. Things are just so tight. Things are this, things are that. And then they start to look at me like, well, you don't have that problem because I know, with your credentials, and now you're an admin, so you don't have these issues. Mm-hmm. Well, I sacrificed a lot, to get here, but that was because I didn't want to be in the place where you are, saying that, oh, things are tight. Things were tight 5 years ago.
Right.
And I didn't know how I was going to pay for daycare. And I didn't know how we were even going to survive if I did quit my job. like the same struggles were there. We just took different approaches.
Yeah.
So that is really where the mom guilt and the shitty mom moments started, because then shortly after getting those small paychecks, having a son, trying to pay for daycare, and you can't, that's when I decided, okay, I have to further my education even more, because while I was pregnant, I was wrapping up my master's degree.
Yeah.
I want to say I went through school, graduate school very early. That was something that I already knew I wanted to do. So I was working on that in undergrad. So here it is. By the time I had my son, I had graduated with my master's. But even with that master's degree, it's like, damn, I'm not making ends meet,
Right.
because I will say education is for the educated. Like, if you want to make money
Yeah.
in education, you have to get those advanced degrees. So that's when I decided, like, all right, I already got the master's degree. I got to get this doctorate. Like, I need to pull in as many resources as I can. And the idea was to get that doctorate in education so that I could maintain the that flexible work schedule that teachers have, but supplement my income enough to where we could be comfortable.
Right.
So I want to say the first 6 years of life with my son, you know, I was working on that doctorate.
Right.
And that kind of put me in a lot of situations to juggle work, juggle parenting, but school was that priority. So unfortunately, he kind of took the back seat with that as well. And I always kept in the back of my mind, like, I'm doing this for
Yeah.
him. I need to provide him with a better life. But along the way, I definitely felt like a shitty mom when he couldn't play sports.
Yeah.
We couldn't do the extracurricular activities because I have a class. I had to rely on friends when my son was very, very young. I had to rely on friends to take him for the weekend. At least he would have a good time. Like, that was my mindset.
Right.
Like,
Right.
they were gonna turn up with him. He was gonna have so much fun, he wouldn't even notice that I was gone. So while he was away with my friends being taken care of, you know, I was at school working on a dissertation. I was at school pulling research and working on research, trying to grind it out for him. So it was definitely like I would hear about these things and see other people with their kids in like little league, and
Right.
I, like you said, I missed out on those things. And I would look like, you know, you see social media like, oh, like we didn't get
Yeah.
a baseball picture or a soccer picture and things like that. And yeah, it just kind of piles up and you feel like shit because you feel like your kid is missing out.
Right.
But as a parent, you just do what you can and you do what you think is best in the moment. So that brings me to my next question. How do you cope with that shitty mom syndrome, as I like to call it? Like those moments where you just have so much mom guilt, or those moments where you feel like as a mom or as a parent, like, damn, I failed at that. Like,
Yeah.
how do you deal with that?
Well, just to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying, I just kind of feel like we want to do it all, but we can't. That's just the reality. We absolutely cannot do it all. And mine kind of stems from the same place of like just wanting to advance in my career so that I can provide my family with a better life, better situation. And so just kind of keeping that in the back of my mind, like, okay, I have to do this because, you know, this will set us up, you know, like you can see a few years down the line where this is going to make the difference. Like if you're dedicated to this one thing, or you see something through and you know that that's going to set you up to make more money in turn, right? Like, and then you can provide your kid with the things that they need. So for me, it's just kind of honing that in by realizing like I'm doing this with my kid in mind, because obviously like my whole thing is just that I want to provide my family with the life that I couldn't even imagine when I was a kid. And so if I'm and I have been fortunate enough to be granted those opportunities. Like, and when I am, I'm like, I can see when I am able to like do the extracurricular now with her, and I don't have to kind of cap myself with what I am able to provide her with, or the experience that I am able to grant her with, you know. Um, that kind of makes all of a world of a difference for me, and it just kind of keeps me going, because I know, like, at the end of the day, like, we need money.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
the cost of
Absolutely.
living is only increasing, and so and we've seen it with our friends, and you know, people that have taken other routes. You know, like, you, it's like if you kept going, you know, when we were younger, or a few years back, like, then you would keep up with inflation, if
Yeah.
you will, right?
Yeah.
So like, inflation is happening at a rate, and then you have to continue to make money at a rate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, like I said, I work in the government sector. We don't always get pay increases,
Right.
and so the way to do that is for you to prove that you're more valuable to the agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you can go ask for a pay increase,
Right.
because we don't always get them. We have to get our pay increases from the governor's office.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with that being said, if you want to make more money, you have to be able to prove that you're an asset. You're a little more valuable than you were, let's say, 3 years ago, right? So I understood that very early on, and just kind of continued and kept up with that. And I'm okay as long as, like, my kid is happy,
Right.
right? And kids are resilient. They're that's what I've learned. Kids are resilient. They're gonna be fine. Like, I know at the core of it, I'm not doing something with my kid or for my kid because I'm just being negligent.
Right.
Because I'm just being a crappy parent.
Right.
Like, there's a purpose.
You can say it, shitty mom.
There's a purpose. You know, there's a purpose for what I am doing that's taking that attention away. Like, it's not just because this is just something that I want to do. Again, like, just to go back, I just said, like, my hobbies take a back seat. Like,
Right.
you know, I might try to carve out some time and squeeze something fun in here and there, but for the most part, it's what the kids need, what the family needs, you know?
Right. Okay. And because we are not just talking about being shitty moms, but this is a behavior change podcast. So you said a couple of things, and I just want to highlight them. Typically, when we're talking about changing behaviors and behavior modifications, what we really do is identify problematic or target behaviors, right? So with shitty mom, we kind of look at ourselves through a lens where we're really vulnerable, but we look at behaviors that we need to change, right? We were talking about just changing habits so that we're able to strike the balance, but then also looking at behaviors where we're kind of coping with what I like to call shitty mom syndrome, right? Where you're just overwhelmed with that mom guilt or the sense of failure because you haven't met certain expectations. So you said a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. One behavior, normally in the world of like behavior change and behavior modification, we would call them replacement behaviors, right? So you identify the shitty behaviors, and then you identify some strategies or some new behaviors that can help you improve those behaviors or those habits. So you said something that was really important. You recognize that you cannot do it all. I think that's huge because we as mothers and in our society, like when it comes to motherhood, it's nonstop. You know, you are the end all be all, and you feel like you have to do it all.
Right.
So the fact that you recognize that you can't sounds like that's one behavior that you've already developed on your own. Just telling yourself, hey, I can't do it all. And that kind of sounds like it forces you to prioritize what's important. And then next, I think is really important that you highlighted keeping the overall picture that you want, keeping that in mind, and working towards it. But more importantly, it sounds like not only are you working towards these things, but you're remaining disciplined enough to see it through.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just sacrificing time and then you
Right.
still don't meet that goal. It sounds like you had a picture in mind for your family, and then you work towards that goal and you remain disciplined enough
Right.
to actually start accomplishing those goals so that you can achieve the lifestyle that you want
Right.
for your family. And that's important because sometimes we start working towards goals, things get overwhelming in an instant,
Mm-hmm.
and then you kind of get lost.
Right.
I can say from personal experience, I felt like there have been plenty of times where I'm just lost. Like, I know where I started, I know what the mission was,
Yeah.
and I'm looking back like, where am I? What am I doing? Because I'm not doing
Mm-hmm.
what I set out to do. I
Right.
know this was the mission. Have I accomplished that mission? No, I haven't accomplished anything at all.
Right.
So now you have to hit the reset button. You have to self-evaluate.
Mm-hmm.
So remaining disciplined to see those goals through, like, that's another behavior if you want to get through that shitty mom syndrome and those shitty mom moments.
Right.
You got to keep the end in mind and stay focused.
Right.
And then self-evaluation, I kind of threw that in there just from my own personal experience, evaluating where you are and just seeing if it's aligned with where you're trying to go and where you
Right.
want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important. And then one more thing you said is that some of your stuff, it takes a back seat.
Yeah.
So that's where it comes to making priorities. But I like early on how you said, when it comes to you and your husband, you're kind of on the same page with that. And you remind yourself that it's temporary.
Right.
So I like to call that like the struggle and juggle,
Yeah.
because you hear a lot of, I think a lot of things in the media, society, culture, just our culture in general,
Mm-hmm.
will tell you, oh, it's about balance. It's about balance. And I have not met
And it's like, how do you balance?
right. Like, I
Something's
haven't,
gonna
if there's a mom
fall
out there that's balancing,
Yeah.
please come on the show. We would love to learn
How
about
you-
this
how you
balance.
do it.
Right, because I haven't seen balance is either, I call it the struggle and juggle, because you're focused on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you have to give it your all, and then, all right, that time is up. You
Yeah.
throw that away and you grab something else and you focus on something else.
Yeah.
Until you just pick up different things along the way, different priorities, different situations happen
Yeah.
that just take your focus and attention away. But like you said, it's temporary. So you come back to it. So if you are a mom out there that has mastered the art of like work-life balance, please come talk to us on the show. We would love to hear from you, and really just hear some advice and some strategies that you have, because I can say personally, I haven't accomplished that at all. So we've talked about like all the shitty moments that we've had and shitty realizations that we've had as moms, but what are some of the rewards
Mm-hmm.
that you have experienced so far in your journey of motherhood?
I would say the thing that's most rewarding, when I see, like, our kids are always watching, right? We're always on stage. When it comes to our children, like, they're always watching us. They want to emulate our behaviors. And so, when I can recognize things with my daughter, like her work ethic, and I know she's only 6, but I've already seen like those early characteristics of like her just having a pretty good work ethic. And I do think that that's because she's been watching, by example. She, if it's school or if it's her extracurricular, like, she's gonna practice until she gets it.
Okay.
Like, I do try and like help her understand, we can practice, but we don't have to beat ourselves to death in order to get something. Like, it's gonna take time. Over time, you'll accomplish these things. Like, she sets these mini goals for herself with cheerleading, And to see her accomplish those things, like, that's a pretty rewarding feeling. Like, to know, like, last year was her first year with this. She had zero experience, and she did a heck of a job. Like, she's caught on to it. Like, she's found her lane, found her niche with it, and she's really enjoying it. And I said, okay, we'll stick with it as long as she's enjoying it. And with regards to school, I put a lot of effort early on. An insane amount of effort early on. I can remember she was probably not even 6 months, and I remember telling my husband, I'm gonna make her a genius.
Okay.
And it was a joke, right?
Uh-huh.
It was absolutely a joke. But then, like, after just kind of seeing, like, what I did was, she went to daycare pretty early on. She was like 4 months when she started daycare, and then she was at a small home daycare where she was with a mixed group of kids. And so the childcare provider at the time, she told me, she would always tell me, like, she shows like such an interest in learning. And so we just kind of honed in on that. And so anything that we did, I made it a learning experience, whether it was we're at the park, we're counting things, or we are identifying colors and numbers and shapes with things like that very, very early on. And I have all these videos of her when she was a little kid, and we would ride home from school, and like, or on the way to school, we would review some things like shapes and colors and numbers. And when they pop up, like, those things give me like the great satisfaction. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm doing something right. And now, like, she's in first grade, and her test scores are always really, really good. Like higher than I expect, you know? So when I see those things, I'm like, oh, okay. So maybe we are
That's
on our way to
awesome.
being a genius.
Okay.
I mean, like,
That's
it's our
awesome.
running joke in our family, but I'm always very satisfied with just seeing the behaviors that she picks up on, and as she grows, you know, like, and you know, as she grows, I'm just fascinated, honestly.
Okay.
Just
And
fascinated.
is it safe to say like that's something that keeps you motivated, or is there something else that
Oh,
motivates you?
absolutely. That absolutely is something that keeps me motivated, because um the ultimate goal for me is to provide her with a life, like I said, that's something that I couldn't even dream of. You know,
Okay.
like, I grew up in the projects, so being able to provide her with the life that she has currently, and then just kind of continuing on that trajectory, that's all the motivation I need.
Okay. So, we're going into the end of this episode, but I want to know, what's the best advice that someone has given you about motherhood?
I'm I know somebody told me this, but just something that I just kind of live by. Again, just understanding that we cannot do it all. And one thing that my boss said to me before, like, while I was pregnant, I was getting ready for maternity leave. She's like, the nights and days are long, but it's gonna be worth it in the end. And like, she's always saying that the kids, they grow apart from you, but they come back. You
Oh,
know, like,
okay.
in those teenage years, or like, you know, we're women, and you know, we have struggles with our moms as girls, you know, young adults, when we were entering into young adulthood. But she's always saying, like, just bear that in mind. Like, they go away, but they come back.
I like that.
You know, yeah. And I think just kind of understanding, again, like, the whole thing for me is just understanding that you cannot do everything. Like, you
Right.
can't. I know we want to, but we can't do it all. So you just, like you said, pick and choose and juggle your priorities.
All right. So that brings us to the end of our episode. This was episode 1, which was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us some insight into your experience. If our listeners wanted to contact you, how can they get in touch with you? Like, if they have any questions, or if, someone, something that you said really resonated with someone and they want to reach out, how can they contact you?
I'll just give my Instagram handle. It's Love Tanya Nicole. It's LUV Tanya TONYA Nicole NICOLE, and
Okay.
that's on Instagram.
All right. So that concludes our episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Hey everyone, it's your favorite BCBAD here, Dr. DeLauren, and I'm here to ask you to help us continue making great content for listeners everywhere by visiting www.forshittymoms.com, where you can make a monthly contribution. Also, visit us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok at For Shitty Moms, and that's shitty with an X, not an I.